Welcome back to Living the Sermon Podcast, a podcast where we have authentic conversations with real people. Join us as we delve into topics that resonate with us, or perhaps should. In this podcast, we talk about the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus, all the things, and how his power and his love can come in and wreck us and save us and heal us and all the things. And so in this podcast, we talk about people's testimonies and their stories in hopes that we can all glean something from it and live out the sermon daily. So today I have Andy Vickers on the podcast, and he talks about his story and his journey through a season of depression. And by season, I mean 2 years. The man tucked away in his house, in his room, because I lived with him and I didn't see him for almost 2 years. For 2 years. And so he talks about how that was, the very low points, suicide. So asterisk, as Andy says, pay attention. If you're in that state or you're having those feelings now, be wise. When we get to that point, there is a point where he prefaces it. But then he talks about the other side. He talks about how the Lord just comes in and just removes the fog from him. After 2 years, he just wakes up and he's just different. And it starts the process of regeneration and sanctification and just being made whole again. It is a beautiful story, beautiful testimony, and I'm so excited for you guys to hear it. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, brother. I'm stoked to be here.
I'm stoked for this conversation. Honestly, this is going to be very difficult because Andy and I talk almost every single day. And so trying to slow down and get in all the details of his story is going to be a task, but I think we're up for it. So, Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us your backstory. Obviously, I want to talk about the last 2 years, 2.5 years, where you went, what happened, all the things. For people who know Andy, Andy, vanished for a little while. But before we even get to that, I want to talk about Andy before. I want to talk about where the Lord kind of came in and saved you and all the things before we even get to that. So, Andy, tell us a little bit about Andy Vickers.
Yeah, for sure. So just grew up, athlete, grew up in the church, first off, we'll say that. So I was saved at age 5. So I've been following the Lord for a long time. Now what that has meant has changed a lot throughout the years. I rode the roller coaster of religion for a long time. I grew up an athlete first. That was kind of the main focus, was I wanted to be this professional wakeboarder. Actually planted a lot of my identity at one point into that. Had 2 of the same injuries back-to-back years and decided to call that quits. And luckily I'd gone to school for business. So I was like, I'm going to fall back on the business aspect, pursued that. Quickly tied my identity to that as well. I have a trend of tying my identity to what I do, and still actively working on not doing so, but I'd say I'm doing a better job than ever now.
Yeah.
So did that, was a serial entrepreneur, founded a couple different companies, co-founded a different couple of companies and startups, and really was doing well from, the outside, what everybody thought, was making a ton of money, had a ton of what I used to call friends. And, everything looked great, but on the inside, man, I was miserable. Basically just stressed to the gills to make it to the next day. It required, however many milligrams of marijuana to actually go lose consciousness to try to get some rest for the next day, and just eventually burn out. And that's kind of probably where you would consider the 2 years starting. And Zach knows this very well because he was my roommate whenever I hit rock bottom. So
Yeah.
uh, that took, 2 years, and we can dive in deep on that. But I'll say the last 6 months of being on the other side of it, man, my entire life has changed. How I structure my life has changed, and definitely how I see God has changed in a ton of
Mm.
ways,
Yeah.
all in good ways. Truly am happier than I've ever been. And I'm definitely more passionate to share the gospel than I've ever been as well, because I feel like I'm
Mm.
just, deciphering like the true gospel for the first
Mm.
time in my
That's good.
31 years of walking this planet.
That's good. Mm. That's good. Well, before we even go back a little bit, like you just said something right there that I want to kind of hone in on. And, a lot of people haven't seen you because, you've been so busy and doing all these things, which is great. And your focus has just changed entirely. So like, I'm not saying that the old friends are dead and gone kind of thing, but like there's just a new vision, a new focus, so many different aspects in life. But in terms of the gospel that you just said and seeing like what do you feel like has caused you to see the gospel in such a different light after being on the earth for 31 years? Like what has led you to such a different perspective?
And I think it's always been there, right? Nothing changed. He definitely didn't change, right?
Yeah.
It was my interpretation. I think that what planted the seed was 2 years of trying to figure out what the heck is going on with my health, to finally come to the end of myself and say, hey, look, I surrender. Like, if there was anything I could take,
Mm.
do, any book that I could read to make this transformation happen, to get healthy again, I've tried them all in the last 2 years, right? So I finally feel like I submitted fully for the first time in my life and said, I'm completely out of control. And in
Wow.
the past, I've said, hey, got to lay down your life for Christ, but always kept a little bit in the back pocket, a little bit in reserves of like self effort,
Right.
discipline, these
Right.
things that I can do. In combination with that, I think that whenever we say woke up, that I, had a viewpoint of God as a happy God, right?
Mm.
Not angry with me for the
Yeah.
first time in my life. So it was always, in the past, it was always, man, sin, I must repent, because I feel like God is looking at me through a magnifying glass.
Right.
And I kind of transitioned to same reason I wouldn't want to let my earthly father down, right? It's
Yeah.
not going to change the amount that he loves me,
Yeah.
but I want to make him proud, and he knows better than I know
Mm.
at this current
That's
state
good.
of maturity. So now I look at it as, man, I don't want to do these things not as like what I'm giving up or so that God doesn't strike me down, but rather like to make him a proud papa. And I know
That's
that
good.
he knows what's best for me, right? And so why not follow these guidelines that he set out?
That's good. Man, that's so good. Yeah, I've loved to like just hear your perspective change and all of that you've went through over the last bit. And it's honestly it's edified me in so many ways. And I'm excited to dive in. But let's back up. Let's back up to let's just say 2019, because you had a similar episode of this. And this is actually when you and I became friends. So Andy and I became friends kind of through Instagram. It was kind of weird. Like I had been in the fitness scene, posting all these things, thinking I'm some, macho man in terms of fitness. And, but I had been posting a lot about fasting, and he decided that one of his first guests on his podcast for F45 was going to be a fasting episode. And he said, well, I know this cat's been posting about it, and he seems like a wise man, yet really I'm just resharing all these other wise people. And I hardly
Extremely
know anything
handsome
about
too. That
fasting.
played
Yeah.
into the selection process.
What was that?
I said extremely handsome as well. That played into the selection
I
process.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. That was before I had hair, for those of y'all who know or don't know. But yeah, so we hopped on this podcast. We're kind of back. This is, I guess, our first episode together since that one back in. When
Yeah.
was that? What was that?
That was
2000?
2019.
Was that 2019 or
It
2018?
was
Maybe.
early 2019 or late
Okay.
or early 2019 or late 2018.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So Andy and I became friends, and So Andy actually ran into a rough patch in 2019. He had started F45 and essentially kind of went into a little state of depression. Had you ever experienced anything like that before 2019?
Man, I'll equivalate that now going through actual diagnosed depression and seeing like how deep you can go. I'll equivalate that um, season of my life as career burnout, right? So just simply doing too much
Yeah.
to where I could not shut down my brain. I was sleep deprived, all of those things.
Right.
Um, but I equivalate that very closely with misidentity, the same thing that I went through when I wasn't the pro wakeboarder anymore,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because
At the root of it, it was that.
right, because at the time I was like, man, I'm not built to run all these businesses, and like basically was telling myself I got lucky up until this point. Like, how do I get out? And I think that my biggest issue back then was, well, like, man, if you get out and you just go get a job, like you won't be Andy the entrepreneur around town.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't show your face. You can't be that guy. So I would say that those were both the same root issue, but they just kind of manifest a little differently.
Yeah. Yeah. So to fast forward a little bit, 2019 happens because I really want to focus on the last leg. And I know that's what most of the people that are listening are probably curious. They maybe heard snippets or understood by following your page on Instagram or whatever and seen, what you've went through. But most people are probably really conscious or worried about, I wouldn't say worried, but like thinking of the last leg. So obviously all that happens 2019, 2020 happens. And you go through a little lull there because, I remember vividly, I was in a transition period in my life from going from a job that I was working at the beach to a job that I'm in now. And I had a lot of free time, and 2020 happened. You had a lot of free time. Your gym closed.
Way too
You
much.
weren't doing real estate at that point, were you?
That's when we started it actually,
Okay. Okay. So yeah, but
but I was early in the game.
right, right. So you weren't doing much real estate. So you spent a lot of time on the river, goofing off, doing all these things, and,
All these
and
things.
all these things, drinking the White Claws and having all the fun. And then, you get back in the saddle. I don't want to spend too much time there. You get back in the saddle and you start, putting your nose to the grindstone, if you will. And then obviously this is where you find some identity crisis. And we've talked about it. We've talked about the female aspect that played into this and in your mentality. I mean, I could sit here and tell you all the conversations, or we could tell you guys all the conversations that we had leading up to the last 2 years, the depression stint of him kind of vanishing. So tell us kind of like in your mind, what like the series of events, you don't have to get too specific if you don't want to, but like how you got to that point. Obviously we know it's an identity crisis at the root of it, but give us a not necessarily a play by play, but like, step by step of how you got to that point.
Yeah. So the what started it far before it was on my radar was I built a lifestyle during COVID that wasn't sustainable when all the businesses turned back on. So I had done well for myself financially. I didn't like I could go without work and things, and I was still making money during COVID, but not to the extent. But it basically gave me this false sense of reality of like, hey man, you can wake up and like work out and then just party the rest of the day every day, and it's always going to be like this. Like the world might end tomorrow.
Right.
And so I lived that life and went back to a lot of like my past sin behavior, right? With females, with alcohol, with drugs, you name it all. I
Yeah.
like to partake it during COVID. And, when the world turned back on, it was stressful because I went from 0 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used some of those same vices to help me to like just make it to the next day, do this thing, this next meeting, this next business plan, this next
Right.
deal, whatever it might be. And throughout doing that, I was slowly taking my way down to right, physically and mentally.
Yeah.
So at the same time, I was still trying to be an Ironman triathlete, right? So I'm training, doing races while I'm still living that lifestyle on the weekends. It's just, none of it made sense. But essentially, again, what happened, I teetered my way down to the bottom.
Right.
I'd put my identity in a romantic relationship as well as a career. And I had kind of meshed those two worlds together. So I felt like I had nowhere to go. And so I didn't. I went to my room,
Yeah.
resigned from everything, handed away a lot of money in real estate deals to others, just short circuited. And then at that point, I had no choice really because I had gotten so low that I couldn't even log into my laptop. So
Mm.
it wasn't even like I was just didn't want to do it anymore. It's like I actually physically was not capable of working.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I remember vividly having a conversation with you, um, sitting there in the condo and you like just like literally rethinking every decision you made in the last like 6 months to a year, even of like, I did this wrong. I did this wrong. I did this. Like you like literally went microscopically. It's like the enemy like took over your body and was like, hey, look, you did this wrong and you did this wrong. You know where you would be if you did this and so on and so forth. And I remember having that conversation. I'm like, dude, you're Andy Vickers, bro. Like you have created such a network that you could quit right now with whomever you're working with, doing whatever you want, and you could go and do it. But you didn't want to hear that because you had just like let go of everything that, was a sense of security or whatever the case may be. And I remember having these conversations and we had multiple conversations surrounding this, but I remember just sitting there being like wanting to shake you and so on and so forth. So obviously you go into your hole and probably people are blowing you up, trying to figure out where you're at. Maybe not initially so much, the people that were close to you, but then it gets to the point to where people were starting to get really worried about you. Tell us about like in your mind, were you just numb to everything? Like how was your mental state within the context of, locking yourself away in your room?
yeah. And before I dive into that, I will put one asterisk. Like when you said me looking at all my mistakes and everything, I will say like the enemy will shine a magnifying glass on every little mistake you've ever made. And the flip side of that is Yahweh assumes the best of you,
Mm,
right? So like,
right.
hey, you did that, but that's not you.
Yeah.
And a big piece of that is identity, right? The enemy
That's
will tell
good.
you, you are that thing
Wow.
instead
Yeah.
of, hey, you did that thing, but that's
Yeah.
not you.
Right. That's good. Well, 1 second. I want to touch on something you just said there. I don't know. I've mentioned it multiple times in the last episodes, but Bible Project did a whole series, and I think we talked about this at one point on the dragon in Scripture. And if you follow, especially in the major prophets, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, like there's so much overlay of like the dragon's influence. Obviously, Revelation was that Revelation 13 where you have the 12 or 13 where you have the dragon, which is kind of directing and guiding the beast, which people interpret that to be a religious entity and a political governmental entity, and kind of playing puppet with them. In the same way, especially when you read the prophets, you can see like the enemy himself can take over us, not in a demon possession way, but like we can wear the mask of the enemy in so many moments. Like when you get cut off in traffic, you can like rear up and like almost look animalistic, like whether it's the sin in you or putting on the mask of the enemy, like that literally can happen. And do that as king, because that's exactly what's happening. Because I'm sitting there like, dude, take off the mask. Like you are not Andy Vickers right now. Wake up. And yet you're obviously covered and your eyes are kind of blinded to the fact that like that's not reality. And you're believing something that seems so real and tangible. It's just hard to shake. I've been there myself. Like in my part of my testimony is being in that dark spot as well. Maybe not to the extent of yours, but in the same way. And it's so hard to shake. And many people that are listening can probably adhere to the fact that like it was seemed so impossible to shake, but God. So go ahead.
Exactly. It was. And it was impossible for me to shake. Like that's still a 100% accurate statement. If it was me, I'd still be laying in my condo, right?
Yeah.
Um, the the biggest piece of transformation for me was basically starting from zero. That's figuratively and literally, whether that be financially, career wise, health wise. I was probably in the negatives if you took an overall health score. Um, I guess some people don't know part of the story, but I gained 100. Well, I lost 25 pounds when I couldn't sleep and I was
Yeah, you
manic,
weighed
and
like
that
what,
stayed
145 at one point?
145.
Yeah, which you're
Then
a person that walks around at what,
170,
185? Yeah,
170,
181. Yeah.
175.
Okay. So
And
so you lost that much weight, and
then gained 100 and got up to 245. So, yeah, all that to say, like, been on all sides of the spectrum. But when I was starting over, like, it was the first time in my life that I wasn't like ashamed to fail or to not like reach perfection in my mind that I thought I was chasing. And, that's the power of the mind of Christ,
mm,
because that was by far and still is, and hopefully always will be, the largest failure of my life, quote unquote failure. But the things I got from it, that I gained from it,
mm,
are intangible,
that's
right?
good.
And
Yeah.
there is no guilt, there is no shame for the first time in my life, even
Yeah.
though, on the surface level and in the physical realm, it should make the most sense for me to be the most guilty and the most shame.
Yeah. That's good. So before we get to the Lord kind of coming in and stuff, there's two things I want to point to. Like I want to point to like your lowest point. Like what was the lowest point of this whole thing? Because I feel like people need to know. And if you don't want to share, your lowest point, then you can tell me and we'll all understand. But at the same time, like I feel like people need to know um, how far you got um, to like just to show like how good God is and how much He intervenes. Because the story that I didn't even know, I guess I was out of town, was crazy. Do
Yeah.
you mind sharing that?
No, not at all. And I always share it, and always, put the asterisk there of like, hey, if you're not mentally well right now and you're listening to this podcast, like,
Yeah,
maybe skip forward a little bit. Like,
yeah,
I'm not trying to romanticize suicide or
yeah.
even shine a light on it, give it any attention, give the enemy
Right,
that attention.
right.
But just so you know the weight of it, and again, God, I had, whenever I first started feeling bad, clearly my loved ones were like, hey, dude, hand over the guns. And at
Yeah,
that point, I was still optimistic, like, hey, I'm going to, kick this thing eventually. I just haven't figured it out. Like, I'm basically just taking a sabbatical. I'm good. And so I handed it all over. Well, I didn't, as soon as I did, the enemy starts whispering in my head, like, you idiot, like that was your ticket out. You know what I
mm,
mean?
mm,
And to make a long story short, I essentially broke into my parents' gun safe while they were gone one weekend, and had a shotgun in my condo and was planning on taking an exit.
mm.
And literally that same day that I went and got the gun, I had friends beat on my door and literally drag me out of the condo, put me on their boat, drive me to their house, and like put me under watch.
Yeah,
And so like that was probably the lowest. And mentally, I was just as low as that day. But I think that day, I at least, like, I was so foggy and so out of it that I think there was at least that little ounce that went, dude, maybe. And I wasn't optimistic at all, but maybe that was for a reason. You know,
yeah.
I'm still not going to do anything about it. I'm still not going to,
Mm,
wake up and go to the gym tomorrow or try to find a job or anything.
right.
But maybe I'm like supposed to still at least be on this planet.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, just the way they came in, like that whole I was out of town apparently or was doing something. I don't remember where I was, but I wasn't at the house. And I remember I mean, I wasn't told this story until after everything. And I was just like, whoa, crazy. Because there was I wish I could like see the timeline of how things happened. But dude, I mean, and I think I've told you this before, but there was many, many days where the way the condo is situated, our bathroom that we use together, like in the not together, but corporately, uh, it the the shower wall is literally where your head would rest to go to sleep at
Mhm.
night. And there was many, many days where I spent a lot of time with the Lord in the shower. I'm sure a lot of people do as well. But I would spend the time with the Lord and it would just be like, just pray. And so I would literally put my hands on the walls and like trying to like get to your head. Like, I just want to just lift him up and just give him the strength to just say, it's okay. Like, God's going to fix this. I don't have to hold on to these things that I've done. And, you know, obviously it evolved over the conversations and what the prayers were specifically for. But, you know, just to remove that, because there was like a heaviness over the condo. And, you know, when this all was said and done, you apologized to me for not being a good friend and for putting that on me. But dude, like, even as, you know, the Lord doesn't do anything without reasons and intentions. And dude, like, that whole season has taught me so much. And just like, you know, perseverant prayers, like how we can just continue to just pray for people and just lift them up. And, you know, sometimes healing happens in an instance, which, you know, you have a story of that happening this week, which is wild, but like, sometimes healing takes time,
Mhm.
and that's just something that we have to store up prayers in heaven, and eventually the Lord will hear us and he will, you know, make it right in his time. And I just vividly remember those times of just like trying to figure that out. I was also dating my wife during this time, and so I was spending a lot of time with her. And so in many ways, I felt guilty for being a bad friend. Like, the enemy would whisper in my ear and be like, no, dude, you need to go and spend time with Andy. You need to drag him out of his room. You need to do all these things. But I knew
Good luck
that
dragging him out of his room.
I know I had tried that many, many times. And so I would
Uh-huh.
hear the enemy, and I'm just like, you know, at times I was like, you need to go in there and say something. Like, the Lord would be like, you need to go say this and this and this. And I would go in there and make you write on your whiteboard, which I have it right behind me in my camera. You probably can't see it on here, but like, I would literally go write like, hey, this, we need to do this, this, and this. Like, make it a point. Like, just get moving. Because in me, like, the neuroscience in my head, I'm like, all you got to do is get moving, bro. But you were also dealing with sleep issue. Like, for a longest time, you couldn't sleep at all, which, you know, as we know, that'll kick off
Mhm.
schizophrenia, that'll kick off all kinds of things. And that probably was attributed to the massive fluctuation of weight change with you, was just, you know, lack of sleep, and then obviously eating poorly. Um, but yeah, wild.
Yeah. Crazy times. Crazy, crazy times. And yeah, I do. You spoke about the heaviness of the environment. Like, that's real. I grew up in the church and would hear people say things like that. I'd be like, woo woo. There definitely was some spiritual heaviness. And, you know, the reason why I was so reserved and so ducked away and didn't respond to people's calls, texts, and all that, it's like the enemy had convinced me in my mind, whatever I had, like, was contagious, was
Mm,
like
yeah,
around me, right? So
yeah,
I didn't want to come watch a movie with you and Rain because I was like, the last thing I want is for this to rub off on
right,
one of my friends.
right.
So there definitely was that environment, and you did a great job of like being a light in that environment.
Yeah, well, the thing is like, that's exactly what the enemy's going to try to do. Obviously, he isolated you, and then he's going to say, that community that you have, you don't need to go be a part of it, because you're going
Hmm.
to just make them worse. Because that's like the compassion, even though it's covered up with this, you know, sheet of darkness. That is the compassion that is within you. That is the Christ that is within you. Like, you know, I'm going to love them by not, you know, and the enemy perverts things, as we know, and
Right.
that's perverted compassion of like, I'm not going to go hurt them. I don't want to put that on them, when in the reality is like, you knew that you needed to get up and go out there, but the enemy was just lying to you and telling you no, because you're going to hurt them, when in the reality is maybe. But that's why we're called to be on guard. That's why we're called to be covered in the blood. That's why we're called to wear the 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 armor of God, Ephesians 6. Like, that's why we're called, or 5 or 6, I think it's 6. Um, that's why we're called to do this. Cause like we literally, Jesus went and touched lepers, man. Like, he literally went and touched people that were ritually unclean or just dirty, and all the things where people, you know, it was a purity thing. And So we're called to be that. We're called to be the light into those dark places. And that's something that, I have to remember myself when it's like so and so is dealing with something and I'm like, I don't want to go over there and mess with that. But, I have to be
Hmm.
like, no, like I'm called to go and bring light to that place.
And
Um,
knowing you have the authority,
yeah,
Christ in you, you have
mm,
that same authority,
that's
right?
good. Yeah,
And also darkness like can't exist independently or dependently really on light. It's just an absence of light. Like darkness
yeah.
really isn't even a thing. If you think about it, if you peel the onion back, there
That's
is
good.
no light.
That's good. That's good. And I just want to read John 1, that portion of John 1 that talks about that. What is in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, and through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. That's so good. Something Pastor Logan told me maybe a few months ago, actually maybe been about a year ago at this point. Time flies. But he said, like, they're still discovering pockets of darkness that are being like revealed by the light that was spoken by God that's going out into the world. Like it's still echoing out into space and existence. And like, so they're finding new places because that light is still going forth, which is hard to imagine, but light has a speed. Like there is a speed of light. And so it's like,
Really
there's like,
fast.
yeah, right. So like it's literally still going and still expanding, and that the darkness is like, being shut out, which is just so good. You've made it to the halfway point, and this is where we drop in our listener retention gimmick. Here we talk about current prayers that have either been submitted or something that's just on my heart. And we also highlight a book, which you see behind me. So for the prayer portion, um, considering the topic of today, I don't have any specific prayers, but I just want to um, I want to make it conscious that someone that is dealing with depression and anxiety. And so I think we need to be praying that first that the Lord would step in and he would heal, and that he would uproot those things that are there, what may have caused it, or so on and so forth, that he would just start the healing process. And then two, I want us to pray for the Holy Spirit to reveal those people to us, that we can go in and, as Andy says, like lay hands on people and believe that God will do a work that he started and he will finish it. Because, by his stripes, we can be healed. And I'm fully believing that. And so let's just do that. Let's just lean into that this week. For the book, as you see here, John Bevere's The Bait of Satan. When I first heard this book title, I was like, why would I want to read something that's got Satan in the title? You should. This book is insane. So it's living free from the deadly trap of offense. The bait of Satan is the spirit of offense. And it very so much is. This book is insane. It is probably one of the best books I've ever read. I even go to the point of saying you need to read this at least once a year. Just get an audio book of it if you're to that point. Obviously, I like to read if it's here in my hand the first time, but then from that point, if it's one of those continuation books, listen to it. It's like a 6-hour listen in the car. That's 2 trips somewhere, just 2 hours. So good. Anyways, thank you guys for listening to this episode. Let's jump back in and see what Andy's talking about. Man, so let's talk about the back end. Let's talk about because I remember getting a text from you. I was at JH CrossFit. I was at the gym training, just finished a hard workout, and I'm like sitting on the wall, putting in my score or whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden I like look at my missed text messages, and you say something like, it's over, or like I'm on the other side, or like I'm through. I don't remember exactly what you said, but you were like, I'm done, call me. And I'm like, what? I had just talked to you like the night before, the day before, because your grandmother um was soon to pass, I think, and
Mhm.
then you were soon to potentially put down your dog at the
Yep.
same time. So walk us through that. Like what was that week leading up to that inbreaking of the Holy Spirit and so on and so forth?
The week wasn't really anything different. The routine of a couple Uber Eats orders a day, watch some YouTube videos that were
Did you
pointless.
did you have a good like did you have a consistent Uber Eats person?
No, they were
No,
always different, man.
always different. I was
Well,
about to say.
actually, hold up. I didn't want any human contact, so it was always check the box, leave at the door. So I couldn't
Oh,
really
okay,
tell you.
okay. Yeah,
I only had to see the person and deal with that inconvenience if there was like an issue with the gate buzz-in code and stuff like that. But
right.
nothing was different routine wise. Matter of fact, like the night before, I definitely felt a little lower than like normal than I had been because yeah, my grandmother was on hospice. She passed away maybe 3 or 4 days after I felt better. I think that she was holding on to see me feel better, right? I
Yeah.
finally went over there and talked to her. Then put my wiener dog down the next day,
Mm.
Humphrey, and he had been battling cancer for like a year. And he had a small tumor on his spine. But literally the day that he saw me better, that I was there petting him all day and everything, we watched the cancer grow, the
Oh
tumor,
wow.
to the point of where his spine was like bending.
Mm.
And so another example, like I felt like he was holding on.
Mm.
Um, so that night I was probably a little bit lower, but I think that like I had gotten a little more worked up. Like I think that I'd felt emotions again a little bit because of grandma and because of my dog, that it had like worked me up enough to like sleep. And I remember I was laying my head on the couch and I was thinking like, man, like I just like I'm gonna like actually sleep good tonight. Like I need to rest. And nothing like profound, nothing crazy, dude. I just woke up the next morning and it was like the fog that was covering my eyes and my brain for the last 2 years was gone.
Mm.
And I actually thought I was sick. So because I sat up and I'm like, ugh, something doesn't feel right. And so I pull out my phone, of course, and I'm on Uber Eats app looking at CVS, like, what do I need? Some Dayquil? Like, what is this? About
Well,
halfway through.
stop real quick. So like that just goes to show how dark you had gotten, because everybody who knows you knows that like you are very like just optimistic, positive, outgoing, fun, like just always energetic, and like you wake up and you're fine, like you're normal, and you think you're sick because for
So
two
foreign.
years, 2 years, I want y'all to stop. Y'all stop right now and think about 2 years. Think about your last 2 years of your life and think about sitting in a room, your bedroom, for 2 years, 2 whole years. Like,
Sounds
of
crazy.
course, you would
Even to someone
automatically.
who did
I know, like 2 years, 2 years. And like, I mean, I'm sitting here almost about to cry just because of like how good God is for not like you not getting to that dark space more times than one or a couple times. Like because it's so easy to revert to like, oh, I'm so unimportant, because even though you had people reaching out to you, you were just probably still like, yeah, they really don't care. Because in my low point, I thought my parents didn't care. Like I was like, they don't even know what's going on. They don't even care. And so, dude, insane. So, all right, sorry. I just want people to realize like 2 years you
two
disappeared
years.
for 2 years. So you wake up and everything's the fog's cleared.
Yeah, fog's cleared. So I'm scrolling through it, trying to figure out the medicine I need for my healthiness, right? And so about halfway through, it just kind of clicked that, like, hold up, like, I don't really think I'm sick. Like, I feel actually good. Like, and really good could be described as neutral, I guess. Like a normal morning, like you don't wake up like just depressed
Yeah.
and mad at the world or yourself, really. Not really mad at the world, just mad at yourself.
Yeah.
And the first thing I did was I looked around the condo And one of my bikes that is on a wall mount in the corner, I noticed it had a spider web like growing through the front spokes, like thick, like Charlotte's Web. And I hadn't noticed it in 2 years because I didn't care if things were clean or, just was not very observant.
Yeah.
And I just felt the Holy Spirit whisper, like, it's time to get back on the path. Like, you need to do something. You need to go, use that, the gifts that I've given you to raise money to make sure that other people don't sit on the couch for 2 years.
Yeah.
So that kind of sparked a little bit of a life in me. I popped up in my laptop and I remember the password for the first time in 2 years. So I'm like, dang, it opened up to a real estate contract, the last one that I was doing whenever I was like, couldn't comprehend it. And I'm looking at it,
Oh,
I don't know what this means. Like, I know these definitions, I know these terms, I know
wow.
this legal jargon. And it was just insane. That's when I started texting you and other people. So my wheels just started spinning. By the end of that day, man, I basically had like a rough outline of like a business plan for the nonprofit I wanted to launch and like
Mm.
really what I wanted to do like in the future moving forward. And it was
Yeah.
all just 100% download from God.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had, was it like an actual sleeping dream that you had that brought this, or was it just like a kind of a waking dream vision?
It was awake. I was fully conscious.
Yeah. So you just had kind of like this download visual of like, hey, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. And then I know you had a second dream that, are you still figuring out the meaning of it?
You're going to have to remind me which one you're talking about. I've been dreaming a
You,
lot, man.
I know, but I can't remember which one it was, but you had a second dream along with that one or that vision. And you were like, I'm still trying to figure out what it is. And maybe it doesn't have significance now. But yeah,
I wish
I
I
do remember
remembered
that.
it. It's
Yeah,
probably written down in a journal somewhere.
right. I'm sure it is. Yeah, yeah. I think I even told you to write it down, um, dude, so automatically you're out. The fog's cleared. It's like, okay, now what's next? Like, talk us through the mentality of like, okay, now like the fog's clear, but now you're thinking of all the relationships that you've had, all the people that have reached out to you. I mean, you had, how many emails did you have?
44,000.
44,000, probably
Probably
43,000 missed calls.
Probably 10% of those emails were legit like human interaction. Like it was a lot, which is still
Right.
4,000. You know what I mean? It's insane. Missed calls, we don't know because like when you get to a certain length of missed calls, it actually starts deleting your call log. Like it was just red as far as you could scroll.
Yeah.
Right? So missed. Text messages, I can't remember. It was like 600, 700, something like that.
Crazy.
And,
Absolutely crazy.
voicemail was full, all the things, right?
Yeah.
So I did think I should probably start interacting a little bit now because like it's necessary to like do anything in life. But I will say I didn't feel the obligation anymore to
Yeah.
respond.
Yeah.
So I went through that and I hand selected the people who I wanted to engage with. And I didn't respond to a lot of people. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. Like I
That's
thought
good.
they might think I was too good to respond or what the case may be. I was like, I don't got the time. Maybe I'll get around to it one day.
Yeah.
But I also, the Lord, really placed on my heart, like I needed a much smaller circle when I
Yeah.
came back because I had a lot of acquaintances, I will classify them as now, that really did do some terrible things to me and really stabbed me in the back. Some that contributed to me kind of getting to that rock bottom, and then some people who took advantage of me being at rock bottom for their
Yeah.
own personal gain. And so I started to interact a little bit more, but I'll tell you the first thing I did was I want to see how many push-ups I can do.
No
So I
way.
got right in the condo floor and I did 6. And on the attempting the 7th rep, I hit my chin on the ground. Thought I was about to knock myself out. And I was like, humble beginnings. But I wasn't discouraged by it at all, which is
Yeah.
crazy because I don't know. I could probably do, I don't know. You would know that I could do a lot of push-ups before I went in that
Right.
hole.
Right.
It was way more than 6.
Is at
And,
least 50.
At
At
least
least
50.
50. At least 50.
And so I was like, man, but I wasn't discouraged. I kind of like, I've always loved a good challenge. So I looked at it as that. But like, I will say, obviously, like the hype does wear off at a certain point whenever you're, on the journey back. And then you start to realize like there's some like real physical things that have manifest due to your decisions that you made, whether it be
Mm.
dietary, no sunlight, no movement, all those things. So I had, plantar fasciitis for the first time in my life. It literally felt like someone was stabbing a knife in every
Mm.
step. And so like I couldn't even walk down the stairs at my condo to take the trash out without like heavily leaning on the handbrake. And then when I was back on the way up, there's 3 flights of stairs. I had to stop and take a breather between each flight. And that was just my reality for a while. But slowly but surely, I was able to increase my output and change my diet back to how it was supposed to be to get to where I am today.
That's good. Yeah, I remember that first week or so. So, like, obviously, all of this happens. And like I said, I was dating my wife kind of at the beginnings of this, maybe like the first 6 months. Started dating her of your, tucking away. And then in the whole span of it, I get married, and my wife hardly even knows you because you're
You didn't
tucked
know the real
away.
me.
She didn't know you. Yeah, she
I
didn't know the
remember
real you at all.
introducing myself when I felt better.
And I just remember like her being like, "This is your friend?" Like, not in a negative way, but like, she was like, I don't see what everybody's saying about this guy. Like, everyone talks about how he's just this entrepreneur. He saw this and all this and all this. And she's like, I didn't see that. But then I remember, oh, I do. This is this. I say all that to say this. We had purchased bikes, and we were like riding almost every other day, at least on the weekends, because we lived on the water, the same place Andy lived at or lives at now. And we would just go ride. And I was like, dude, so now that you're out, let's go ride. And you were like, all right, first off, I don't have any clothes that fit me. Let me get some clothes that fit me first off. And not only that, your only bike that you have at the time was one that you got to clip into. And so you were like, dude, I don't even know if I can even stand up on a bike. So give me a little bit. So I think it took you a couple weeks, but I think one of the first posts that everyone in the world like knew, okay, Andy Vickers he's out. Like he's out and he's like different. Something's going on was when we went bike riding. And not only that, like in that ride, I almost like cried the whole time because you were true, like I was with you and you were being yourself, not only in front of me, but also in front of my wife, which is a person that you didn't know. And you were just being your true, authentic self and being goofy and funny. And Rain's over here just laughing her tail off. Like, this guy is freaking okay. Now, okay, this is the Andy that you're talking about. Okay, I can get with this. Like, he's different.
I gotta say, on that bike ride though, that was the toughest. Like I've done Ironman, I've done century rides. Like that was the toughest bike ride of my life. Like
Oh yeah.
I
What did we
didn't know,
ride? Like, how many miles did we ride?
like 4 maybe.
Yeah.
Like it was insane. And I had to stop at one point on the way back. It was getting dark. And I was like, y'all just go ahead. I got my light. I'm good.
Yeah.
But like that put it into perspective of like, wow, like I really didn't know how like fit I was before and
Yeah.
like took it for granted.
Yeah.
But then also one other thing to note is I saw that picture of my camera roll, the selfie you took when we were on the bike the other day. And literally I think my beard line was like right here. Like it was even with my nose, my whole face was covered in hair as before
Yeah.
I even got it lined up or anything. It was rough.
That was such a wild time. But so obviously you're on the other side now, because I wanna kind of wrap this up, and then I want you to kind of just share your heart on depression and all these things, and some practicality. But so now that you're on the other side of it, I remember you saying, I'm not doing anything until the new year, because it happened. So you came out on the other side when? What was the
September, it towards the end of September.
okay? So October, November, December, you were like, I'm hardly doing anything. I'm just going to focus on my relationship with the Lord and kind of just get my feet back under me, lose some pounds, all the things, before I really, really get out. Obviously, you're making phone calls, you're connecting with people. But now that we're in, on this other side, like, what's Andy doing now?
And so I started a nonprofit called the Keep Going Foundation. And basically what it's going to do is be a fundraising nonprofit for other nonprofits that already exist, a lot in the medical space, whether it be like with Wounded Warrior, any veteran resources for like PTSD and any mental health related issues that come from that, as well as like health clinics, Victory Health Partners that services working class adults without health insurance. So we're building a mental health and wellness component of that. And then I'm partnering with another named One More Moment that equips parents with resources whose kids are going through mental health struggles. And there's a handful of others I could list the name of. But anyways, I'm going to be doing some like endurance fitness challenges to raise money for those causes. So I focus on that a lot. Then I work with D1 training. So I work with them in franchise development with the overall goal of getting more locations around the country to get folks healthy, fit. And we all know that's a massive component of your overall health, which ties into your mental health and everything. So
Right.
back to fully pursuing the passion of health and fitness, and this time from a lens of like, I always could look people in the eyes and say, man, I know what you're going through. I was a chubby kid in middle school. Now I can look them in the eyes and go, dude, I know what you're going through. I lost 80 pounds this year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of passion there in that. And, man, aside from that, dude, just pursuing the Lord. That's a full-time job in itself, right? So
Yeah.
it's been awesome, as well as I do have a girlfriend now. So that relationship is obviously top and center as well.
Yeah.
But we pursue the Lord together. So it's killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Like, for those of you who don't know, like, here's the thing, Andy, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people don't realize that you struggled with your weight as a young kid. Like,
Yeah.
you have been so like diligent and just so disciplined in the last, I guess, what is it, maybe 10 years since you've kind of
14
really,
is when I started doing something about it.
yeah,
But literally doing it, diet and everything, 16. So we
yeah,
don't have to discuss how many years ago that was, but it was a while
yeah.
ago.
Yeah, but a lot of people just don't realize, like, that's like you are the type of person, you're opposite of me. Like, I'm a person that I could go eat, which I do a lot of times, eat a sleeve of Oreos every night with a huge glass of milk, and I won't see an ounce of body fat put on me. And I'm sorry to you guys that are going to get mad at me for saying that. Like, that's just the way the Lord made me, and it comes with its own things. I can't put on muscle mass, which you don't necessarily
Tough to
need,
be a
but
roommate with somebody like that if you're not wired that way. Let me just tell
right,
you.
right. But a lot of people don't realize that about you, and
Yeah.
that, like, the fact that you got to 140 with that goes to show like how low you got. And then obviously when your chemicals maybe started working a little bit better for you, it kind of came back and caught you, bit you in the butt.
Yeah.
But obviously you've dropped how many pounds now?
Right around 65, between 65 and 70.
Yeah. And your goal is to
So
drop.
we got about 10, 15 more pounds to
Yeah.
go before this first race of the year. So
Yeah, but a lot of people still think that you're a little overweight because you've swapped from wearing tight clothes like you used to wearing
yeah, man,
baggier
I'm on them
clothes.
baggy hitters now, boy.
Baggy clothes, dude. We're like late to the culture game of like wearing baggy clothes, because I'm the same way. If I'm in the gym, I want something a little tighter, but overall, give me an XL, and I mean I'm a buck 55, buck 60. Give me an XL. Give me a double XL if you got it. But yeah, so practicality. Obviously, you just touched on a couple points, but if you have a couple extra things that you would just say, hey, look, this is most important. I mean, I think the first one is talk to somebody. Like, don't be ashamed. Like, you have to be open. And I think that's the stigma, especially for us men, is to kind of grapple it ourselves and just hold it within and not speak to someone. But talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta shine the light on it, right? You gotta shine the light on the darkness. It has to flee because it's just an absence of light, right? It's not a thing. That's what I like to say. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
unless something else is absent. And so, speaking on it is huge, but at some points, like, you might not physically be able to speak on it because you can't connect your thoughts and all that. And that's really where, like, God comes in. And it's cliche to say, like, oh, just trust God, just lean on God. I don't even say it so much on that side of things anymore, because I'll tell you, like, you can be so low that, like, you don't know that, even if you
Hmm.
grew up a Christian your whole life. But the real thing is, man, is like most people don't know how loved they are. Like, if you peel the onion back enough layers and you truly know what his love is like, you can't contain that shame.
Yeah.
You can't feel the guilt for the mistakes. And I can't say 100%, but I'll say the far majority of people who are experiencing anxiety and depression is because they're dissatisfied with something that came as a result of their effort,
Mm.
right? And when you truly know the love of Yahweh, you get off the hamster wheel of performance. What can I do to get closer access? What can I do to make him not mad at me? What can I do to this, to that? It's like, you don't have to do anything except the fact that he loves you, right?
Yeah.
And he is in you. Christ is in you.
Yeah.
And so taking that burden of how can I just do X, Y, or Z to get closer to God, or to not make these stupid mistakes, or whatever the case may be, like, just take the performance anxiety out of the picture, because there is no performance aspect.
Mm. That's good.
Now, when you do know the love of the Father, then you will want to do these things to grow deeper in your relationship with him. But it's not from a place of like fear of punishment for not doing so. It's a pure craving to actually do so.
Yeah.
So, like, yes, talk to people and make sure you surround yourself with people like Zach was that person for me. And now I want to be that person for others. Like, that is important. But, like, ultimately, at the end of the day, we can only help try to point you towards that light, right? That's shining through us, that we're illuminative with. We can only hope to shine that light so that you can see it, but it's going to take the source of that light to do anything about
Right. That's so good. Gosh, it's so good because I can't fix Andy. I couldn't fix Andy in that situation. I just could only be a representative of the one who can and point him ultimately to that one. And that's so good. I know one of the things that we talked about after all of this was Sabbath and creating margins. So tell us what you've done practically to create that space of rest and recharging and getting yourself back acclimated to the speed of life and but most importantly to back up.
it. Well, a huge part of it was throughout those 2 years, I didn't give a rip about social media or obviously responding to messages or anything. So I got really good at, like, forgetting that I have a phone. So that's super important in the evenings, when I'm trying to spend quality time with loved ones or read or anything, right? Like, the phone's not a piece of that equation. One day a week, I don't use it at all. Try not to. I do have, like, some family ties now, and things where I need to know if something happens with young children involved and things of that nature. But it's I now have the discipline to go, I don't need to respond. So that's huge, unplugging. And then other things I do are, like, man, just, like, I make sure I take a walk every single day. Can't tell you how many times Zach would be like, dude, bro, like, let's just go on a walk. Like, you need these things. And like, even me being in the health and fitness space, I knew I needed them. But, like, there's a huge piece of your overall health, mental health, weight control, all that with, like, getting grounded to the earth, getting sunlight, moving your body. So make sure that you take that walk in whatever form of exercise might look like for you. It doesn't have to be in the gym using weights. Like, it can be riding a bike, it can be walking, it can be swimming, whatever the case may be, but, like, making sure that you're active. So one day a week, that's all I focus on.
Good. That's so good. Gosh, that's so good. Any last thoughts that you want to leave with somebody who might be dealing with, something like this, that you've encountered and journeyed through already?
Yeah, man, I would just say, if you're, well, first off, if you're not a believer, like, hey, dude, it might sound crazy, but like if you're at the end, my pitch to anyone in that place is, if you feel like you're at the end of your rope, like, why not try it? You know what I mean? Hey, we've got nothing. You're not going to get any worse. I
That's
can
right.
guarantee you that by following the Lord. Second from that is like, take authority over your situation, because I would say I was a very authoritative person before, like very assertive, like determined if I wanted to reach a goal, I was going to reach it. But I somewhere along the lines let the enemy whisper to me like to take the back seat. And I think that that's the first thing that the enemy does, because he knows the power that's within you. Like
Mhm.
you have the authority, the same authority that rose Jesus from the dead, right? The same thing is in you. Like,
Yeah.
and that's zero exaggeration. I mean, there's been countless examples of where, the day that I felt better, I asked God from now on to order my steps and to make it so blatantly obvious when it's him in a situation versus when it's me wanting my own desires. I basically told him like, dude, slap me in the face so that I know. And
Yeah.
he has day in and day out by showing me that authority that I have within me, whether that's laying hands on the sick. I mean, praying, seeing people's cancer fall off their body, like the list goes on. I remember one of the first week or so that I was feeling better, I started to move around. I'd been dealing with kidney stones
Mm.
for the past 2 years. And once I started to move, I learned very quickly that I had some kidney stones still inside of my body. I don't even know if you know where I'm going with this, Zach, or if you remember the story, but I was at my condo and Zach was at his unit across, and I called him. I was in a sweat. Like I looked like I was in the sauna. I stripped down butt naked. I was laying on my floor in the condo. I called him and I said, bro, can you bring me like some Gatorade and some Advil? I think, or,
Advil. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, anything for the pain. Like, got more kidney stones, I might have to go to the hospital. And he said, yeah, man, absolutely. And before the time he walked from his, 100 yards away from my condo to me, I had the thought in my head pop up because the Lord had already started revealing to me, like, yo, like you have the power to manifest things and to do his works on this earth. And I said, dude, I've laid my hands on people my whole life. Prior to that point, hadn't really seen much come from it. Don't think I was very expecting. I said, I'm going to do it on myself. I got the power, right? I put my hand on where I thought my kidney stones were in my body, and I just started to pray. And by the time Zach walked 100 yards up my condo steps, I opened the door and I was like, hey, man, what's up?
You put clothes. You put clothes on at this point,
I
right?
put clothes on first. Yeah, I was clothed. I might not even have a shirt. I don't know.
Good for y'all,
But
man.
I was like, hey, man, like, it's all good, brother. Thanks for the Advil. I'm gonna go ahead and take it anyways. But like, they're gone. I
Yeah.
physically felt it pop in my body, and I never peed it out.
Crazy.
Crazy
Crazy.
stuff, man.
Wild stuff. Yeah. So
So all that to say, I'm not special.
Hmm.
No man is any more special than the other. Upper room, lower
Come on.
room. We all have the same authority
Come on.
as followers of Christ. Like, just use it and use it expectantly. But don't forget to use it on yourself too.
Yeah.
I've used it a lot in my life for others,
Yeah.
but for some reason, like when it comes to us, we just think, oh, well, like, actually, I don't know why we do that. Why do you think we do that, Zach?
I think it's partially the enemy and just the lack of true beloved identity that you've alluded to, like
Mm-hmm.
just lack of like going back to our old self, like, instead of putting on the newness of life, like it's easy for us to revert back because we're working out. I was talking to a buddy today, literally about 30 minutes before this, about how like some of those sins that we've, like, you and I are 30 years old, like the sins that we've been clinging to since we were, 25, the first 25 years of our lives, that's not going to like disappear, or at least the temptation for those sins is not going to just simply disappear, because those were a major part of our lives, not a good part, but like, so we're still working out. And that's what Paul talks about, like working out the sin as like members of our body. We're still working it out, even though we're like new. We still have to work out these old things. And so it's reverting back to that old identity. It's not becoming unsaved. It's not becoming, whatever. It's just simply just reverting back. And we have to like take every thought captive and call out things. 1 John 4, we have to call out things and being like, no, that's not of the Spirit of the Lord. And that's not going to happen here. It's like just literally what you said. Like we have to take authority over those things, big or small. Like no matter how small it is, like you watch a movie or something that has some evil presence in it that you're like, you know what, I'm going to stick away from that. Like Jonathan Bacluto, which is one of my favorite voices, he's very open about his past, sexual sins and pornography and things like that. And he talks about like the moment there is like a movie that he's watching and there's like there's like a scene where no one's naked, there's nothing going on, but the moment he watches it and he senses that like his mind is starting to venture in the path of like, I kind of want to see what's underneath that. I kind of want to see like the moment his
Yeah.
mind, like he's not he's not full on sinning, he's
Right.
not lusting yet, but like the moment he starts to get tempted to go down that
Cuts it
pathway,
off
he's like,
before.
no. He takes the authority and he says, no, turning
Yeah.
it off. I'm going to go pray. I'm going to go do whatever I need to get myself. I just love that because it's
And
so
it's
like,
not even that the girl in the film that has the bikini on is sinning or doing anything wrong. It's that he has a problem. Speaking
exactly.
of, like,
And he's conscious of it.
yeah, speaking of, if you a shawty and I unfollowed you on Instagram in the past few months, like, don't take it personal, right? It
Hey,
was an issue I had in the past.
dang.
There's nothing wrong with your bikini picture. As long as you're doing it in the right headspace for the
Right.
right reasons, it's a me problem.
Yep.
So that's a great thing to point out because like you have to protect yourself from what your weaknesses are. And some people's weaknesses are in different areas than mine, right? Like I
Right.
don't have any alcohol in my life and never will ever again. Was I an alcoholic? No. What alcohol did for me is it was a trigger that led me to the other sins that weren't a problem.
Yeah.
It was a facilitator of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I had to snip it from the root. That doesn't mean, and I mean, I go out to dinner all the time with friends and family and they can have a drink and it doesn't affect their life the way that it does mine.
Yeah.
But I have to do that because it's an
Right.
issue of
Right. And you're conscious of that. And, we should be conscious of that because we're friends of you. And, obviously you just said that you're perfectly fine with being around it. But even as just people that are near to you or near to anyone who struggles with something, we need to be conscious of that to not place stumbling blocks in front of them. And ask and be like, hey, look, is this okay? We're going to watch a movie that's got this. I know you've been struggling with this. Is that okay? Like, don't
right.
want to tempt you, don't want to put you in an awkward position. So Andy, how can we get in touch with you? Obviously, I think everyone that's listening to this podcast, if you're not following Andy already on Instagram, you should because he's constantly posting good content. He's constantly pointing to some of these foundations that he's alluded to that his foundation is going to support and push, and then the number of other things that he's doing with I can think of the men's health stuff, blackballed golf. I can think of a number of things that you are supporting and that are very, very awesome and important. But I really want to push you guys to go follow his journey because it's going to be awesome. And not only that, like I don't know if you're open to, and I'm sure you are, to people reaching out to you that might be struggling with something that's similar. What's your Instagram handle and all that jazz, and I'll make sure to put it in the notes.
Yeah, please do reach out if I can help in any way. It might not get a prompt response because, like I said, I'm good at forgetting the phone, especially the social media aspect of it. But it's just keep.going.andy on Instagram. And in terms of like email or anything, if you're not a social media person, just andy.vickers@d1training.com.
Okay, perfect. Dude, thank you so much for hopping on, man. I know we ran
Yeah.
over a little bit, but it's pretty easy for us to keep talking.
Right. I knew me and you couldn't keep it under.
Yeah, we kept it close.
It wasn't possible. We did if people knew us and our conversations and how deep they get, like we did really good.
Yeah, we did really good. And not only that, like that was the kidney stone thing was something that I wanted to talk about, but it completely slipped my mind. So I'm glad you brought it up. But
Yeah, boy.
yeah, man. Well, like I said, y'all go follow him, and thank y'all for tuning in. And Andy, thank you for hopping on and sharing your story, man. It's it's powerful, and I don't want you to stop sharing it because it carries weight. I don't want the enemy to lie to you. So keep sharing it, bro. Keep loving people the way you do. Let's change this world one moment at a time.
Thanks, bro. Sounds like a game plan.
All right, brother. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Living the Sermon with Andy Vickers today. Isn't that story just so powerful? It's so awesome. Obviously, I was in the midst of it, but to see the Lord listen and answer all of our prayers that we were praying for Andy during that season, and him just coming out on the other side, and the fact that God just literally just healed him. We should be screaming that from the mountaintops of God did a work here. And he is. Luckily, he is believing and truly believing that he can take that same power and go out into the world. And so with that being said, like I said, right there in the exit, follow Andy. His story is still making waves. He's just really getting started. This is all fresh 6 months ago. And so I'm anxious to see how the rest of this is going to unfold. But his Instagram handle, I have it pulled up, is keep.going.andy on Instagram. So at keep.going.andy. And then his foundation Instagram is also keep_going_foundation. There you'll be able to find all the things that he's interwoven in, and he's found himself. Obviously, as he said, Victory Health is one of the major ones. So many things revolving around men's health. Movember is being one of them. The veterans, PTSD, all the things that he's found himself called to step in and make a footprint in and just bring to the light, all ultimately revolving around mental health because of his story and how he has been, ultimately, sifted and those things have fallen away, and the Lord's kind of made him new and whole. So be sure to follow him. Follow the podcast at Living the Sermon, no G, Living, LIVIN, no G, the Sermon. And there you'll be able to find quick clips, highlights, and the occasional teaching. So thank you guys for tuning in today, and stay tuned for next Monday for the next episode. Have a good one.